The night was supposed to be perfect. Everything about it felt controlled, powerful, and electric. On stage, Cardi B was doing exactly what she's known for, commanding the crowd with confidence, owning every second and delivering a performance that felt unstoppable. The audience was screaming, the energy was at its peak, and for a moment it seemed like nothing could go wrong. But sometimes, the most perfect moments break without warning. As soon as Cardi B stepped off the stage, something shifted. At first, it was subtle, so subtle that most people wouldn't have noticed. There was a slight pause in her movement, a change in her posture, and a look on her face that didn't match the confidence she had just shown in front of thousands. Within seconds, that small change turned into something serious. According to people backstage, Cardi B suddenly collapsed without any warning. This wasn't just exhaustion or a moment to sit down, it was a full fall. The kind of moment that instantly sends shock through everyone in the room. The noise faded, the excitement disappeared, and panic took over. People began shouting. Crew members rushed toward her. What had been a high-energy performance just moments earlier turned into complete chaos behind the curtain. And then came the moment that made everything even more emotional. Offset ran straight toward her. Witnesses say this wasn't a public reaction or something for the cameras. There were no performances here, no personas, just raw, real emotion. Offset didn't just look concerned. According to insiders, he broke down completely. There were tears, panic, and a visible sense of fear. The kind of reaction that makes it clear this wasn't being taken lightly. This wasn't just another health scare. It was something that genuinely shook him. For a moment, the spotlight disappeared, and what remained was a man watching someone he loves in a frightening situation, completely unsure of what would happen next. What makes the situation even more unsettling is that it may not have been entirely unexpected. Sources claim that earlier that night, there were already signs that something wasn't right. Cardi B reportedly seemed more tired than usual. Her energy felt slightly off. Some noticed small changes, but nothing that immediately raised alarms. At the time, it was easy to dismiss it as normal fatigue. After all, she's known for working hard and pushing through. But now, those small moments are being looked at differently. Over the past few months, Cardi B has been under intense pressure. Between music, performances, appearances, and her personal life, the workload has been non-stop. Fans had started to notice subtle signs, moments where she looked drained, interviews where her energy wasn't the same, and clips where something just felt slightly off. At the time, most people brushed it off. She's always been strong. She's always pushed through. But one resurfaced clip is now getting attention. In it, Cardi B jokingly mentioned that she had been pushing herself too hard and not getting enough rest. At the time, it sounded like a casual comment. Now, it feels more like a warning that wasn't taken seriously. This is where Offset's role becomes even more important. According to people close to the situation, Offset had been one of the few who truly saw what was happening behind the scenes. He noticed the fatigue, the pressure, and the moments where she needed to slow down. He reportedly encouraged her to rest, to take a break, and to not push herself beyond her limits. But as often happens in the entertainment world, slowing down isn't always easy, especially when expectations are high and the spotlight never fades. The story of Cardi B and Offset has never been simple. Their relationship has always been in the public eye, filled with highs that seemed untouchable and lows that felt impossible to recover from. From surprise proposals to public breakups, from cheating allegations to emotional reunions, their journey has been anything but ordinary. And yet, despite everything, they've always found their way back to each other. That's what makes this moment hit even harder. Because beyond the fame, beyond the headlines, there's a real connection between them. A relationship that's messy, emotional, and deeply human. And in a moment like this, all of that becomes visible in the most raw way possible. When someone who always appears strong suddenly becomes vulnerable, it changes how people see everything. Now the biggest question remains, what really happened? Was it simply exhaustion? Or was there something more serious behind the collapse? Were the earlier signs pointing to a bigger issue that went unnoticed? Right now, there are more questions than answers. Rumors are spreading, fans are demanding clarity, and discussions are growing louder across the internet. But one thing is certain, this was not just another moment. It was a reminder that behind the fame, the performances, and the larger-than-life image, there is a real person, someone who can get tired, overwhelmed, and pushed beyond their limits. And sometimes, even the strongest people need to stop, breathe, and be taken care of before it's too late. The truth is, Cardi B has never been the type to slow down, not when there's work to be done, not when expectations are high, and definitely not when millions of eyes are watching her every move. That relentless drive is part of what made her who she is. It's the reason fans admire her, the reason her performances feel larger than life. But sometimes, that same drive can come at a cost. Because while Cardi kept pushing forward, refusing to pause, there was someone right beside her who saw things differently: Offset. Imagine the situation for a moment. One person determined to keep going no matter what, fueled by pressure, ambition, and expectation. And the other watching closely, noticing the small signs, feeling the growing concern, but unable to fully stop what's already in motion. That kind of dynamic creates tension. Not loud, explosive tension, but the quiet kind. The kind that builds slowly in the background, unnoticed by most, until something finally breaks. According to insiders, that's exactly what had been happening in the weeks leading up to that night. There were whispers, nothing officially confirmed, nothing dramatic enough to make headlines at first, but enough to make people behind the scenes start paying attention. Subtle concerns about exhaustion, quiet conversations about how hard Cardi had been pushing herself, small moments where she didn't seem like herself. And then came the night of the performance. What many people don't realize is that, according to some sources, that night may not have gone exactly as planned. There are claims, again, unconfirmed but widely discussed, that Cardi had considered canceling, that there were last-minute conversations about whether she was feeling well enough to go on stage. Some say she hesitated. Others say the concerns were briefly discussed and then brushed aside. Nothing official has been confirmed, but if even part of that is true, it changes everything. Because then what happened backstage wasn't just sudden. It wasn't random. It was something that had been building, something that may have been preventable. And when you look at it from that perspective, Offset's reaction starts to make a lot more sense. If he had already been worried, if he had already noticed the signs, if he had already tried to tell her to slow down, then watching her collapse right in front of him wouldn't just be shocking. It would be devastating. Witnesses say that the moment everything happened, the entire atmosphere shifted instantly. 1 second there was structure, control, routine. The next, all of that disappeared. Because as soon as Cardi stepped off stage, something was clearly wrong. At first it was subtle. She didn't immediately collapse. Instead, there were small signs easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention. She slowed down. Her steps lost their usual confidence. Her body language changed. She looked disoriented. One crew member reportedly noticed and asked if she was okay. It was a simple question, the kind people ask all the time backstage. But before she could even properly respond, everything changed. Her body gave out. There was no dramatic warning, no build-up. One moment she was standing and the next she was on the ground. And just like that, everything turned into chaos. Crew members rushed in from every direction. Someone shouted for medical help. Another person yelled for space to be cleared. Voices overlapped. Instructions were thrown out rapidly, but for a few seconds, no one seemed fully in control. Because no one expected this. Moments earlier, she had been on stage, performing in front of thousands without missing a beat. And now, suddenly, she was unresponsive on the ground behind the curtain. Then Offset saw it. And what happened next is what people can't stop talking about. Instead of staying back, instead of letting security or medical staff handle the situation, he ran straight toward her. Witnesses say he pushed past people, ignoring instructions, calling her name over and over again. There was no hesitation in his movement, no calculation, just urgency. Cardi, look at me. According to someone who claimed they were only a few feet away, his voice didn't sound like a performer. It didn't sound controlled or composed. It sounded like panic. Real panic. The kind that comes from fear, not confusion. They say he dropped to his knees beside her, trying desperately to get a response, trying to bring her back into the moment, trying to understand what was happening. But something was wrong. She wasn't responding the way people expected. And that's when the situation became even more serious. Because now this wasn't just someone feeling dizzy or fainting for a second. This was something deeper, something that made even the medical team move faster, more urgently. The energy shifted again, this time from chaos to fear. And then came the moment that left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. As medics worked to stabilize Cardi, Offset reportedly broke down. Not quietly, not in a controlled way. Completely. Witnesses described tears, shaking, visible distress. The kind of emotional reaction that strips away any image, any persona, any sense of public identity. Because in that moment, he wasn't an artist. He wasn't part of a public narrative. He was just a man watching someone he loves in a situation he couldn't control. And that's what made it hit so hard. There were no cameras meant to capture that moment, no performance to maintain, no audience to impress. Just raw, unfiltered emotion. And then, just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more intense, a new detail started to emerge, one that changed how people began to view everything. According to a crew member who later spoke anonymously, there may have been a warning sign earlier that night. They claimed that before the performance even began, Cardi had already mentioned not feeling completely okay. Nothing extreme, just off. A little lightheaded, slightly weak, not at her best. At the time, it may not have seemed serious enough to stop everything. In an environment where pressure is constant and schedules are tight, small discomforts are often pushed aside. The show must go on. And that's exactly what happened. The performance went ahead as planned. But now, looking back, that decision is being questioned. Because if that claim is true, if she had already expressed that something wasn't right, then this situation becomes much more complicated. Now people are asking difficult questions. Why wasn't the show delayed? Why wasn't she pulled back for rest? Who made the decision to continue? And most importantly, did someone underestimate how serious it really was? These aren't easy questions, and right now there aren't clear answers. What started as a shocking backstage incident has now turned into something much bigger, a conversation about pressure, responsibility, and the hidden cost of constantly pushing forward. Because in the world of fame and performance, there's always an expectation to deliver, to show up, to keep going no matter what. But moments like this force people to stop and think. How far is too far? At what point does pushing through become dangerous? And could this have all been avoided if someone had simply said, "Stop"? Right now, fans are left with uncertainty. Rumors continue to spread. Stories continue to evolve. But one thing is undeniable. That night wasn't just about a performance gone wrong. It was about a moment where everything real, fear, pressure, love, and vulnerability, came crashing through the surface, reminding everyone that behind the spotlight, there are still human limits. And sometimes, those limits demand to be respected, whether the world is watching or not. That night was supposed to be just another show, another moment where Cardi B would take the stage and command attention as she always does. She had built a career on her energy, her charisma, and her ability to dominate every crowd, every moment, and every second she was in the spotlight. Millions were watching, cameras were rolling, and the energy in the arena was electric. For Cardi, performing was never just a job, it was her element, her stage to own. Every step, every word, every beat was calculated, practiced, and executed with the precision that had earned her millions of fans around the world. But as anyone who has ever been on stage or watched someone live every day under immense pressure knows, the spotlight can hide the most human of vulnerabilities. And on that night, the unthinkable happened. What began as a regular, high-energy performance turned into something no one could have anticipated. As Cardi stepped off the stage, the first subtle signs appeared. At first, they were almost imperceptible. A slight pause in her movement, a shift in posture that was out of character, a look in her eyes that didn't match the confidence she had just displayed in front of thousands. It was a fraction of a second, a small anomaly, easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. But for those who were close, people who knew her energy, her rhythm, her usual presence, it was noticeable. Something was off. And then just moments later, it escalated. Cardi B collapsed. Not a minor stumble, not a brief faint. She fell completely, a sudden drop that left the room frozen in shock. The music seemed to stop. The energy that had been so high just minutes before disappeared. Panic took over. Crew members rushed from all directions. People shouted for medical assistance. For a few seconds, no one knew what to do. No one could predict what was happening. Amid the chaos, there was one figure whose reaction defined the night: Offset. Witnesses describe him not as a performer maintaining composure for the cameras, but as a man overwhelmed by fear and love. He ran straight toward her, pushing past others, calling her name over and over. He dropped to his knees beside her, desperate for a response, trying to anchor her in reality. "Cardi, Cardi, look at me," he pleaded over and over, his voice raw, unpracticed, real. What makes this reaction so striking is that Offset had reportedly been noticing the warning signs long before this moment. He had seen the subtle fatigue in her step, the brief moments of hesitation, the tiny expressions of discomfort that most would never notice. According to insiders, he had urged her to rest, to slow down, to take care of herself before it got worse. But Cardi, as she always does, pushed forward, refusing to let anyone, including herself, acknowledge the limits her body was clearly signaling. These questions continue to dominate the conversation. Social media, entertainment outlets, and fan forums have dissected every angle, every clip, every whisper. What once appeared to be a single, shocking incident is now understood as part of a larger, more complex story about the realities of life in the public eye, the invisible burdens of fame, and the fragility of even the most powerful performers. Offset's reaction, in particular, has become emblematic of the human cost of these pressures. Witnesses describe him not just as emotional, but completely unguarded, collapsing in despair next to Cardi as medical staff tried to stabilize her. The image of him kneeling, calling her name, and visibly shaking has resonated widely, not as celebrity drama, but as raw human emotion. It's a moment that stripped away the veneer of fame and reminded everyone that behind the persona is a person who feels, who fears, and who cares. The discussion isn't over. Rumors continue to emerge about what exactly happened backstage: arguments, tense discussions, concerns ignored or debated. Fans analyze each frame of video, each subtle shift in expression, searching for signs that the collapse might have been preventable. And as new details leak, the story continues to evolve, deepening the intrigue and raising new questions about the pressures performers face and the limits of human endurance. Ultimately, what makes this story so compelling and so unsettling is not simply that a celebrity collapsed on stage. It is that the incident exposes the hidden costs of success, the delicate balance between ambition and safety, and the human realities that lie beneath the carefully curated image of fame. Cardi B's collapse, Offset's reaction, the backstage drama, and the public scrutiny all combine into a cautionary tale about the price of relentless drive, the complexity of decision-making under pressure, and the raw, unpredictable nature of human vulnerability. It's a story that reminds us that even the strongest, most confident performers are human, that determination and ambition can clash with physical and mental limits, that those who love and care for them can feel powerless, even in moments of crisis, and that the consequences of ignoring subtle signs, no matter how small, can be immediate, chaotic, and emotionally overwhelming. This night will be remembered not just for the collapse itself, but for everything leading up to it. The decisions, the pressures, the subtle signs, the backstage tension, the desperate efforts of loved ones, and the intense public scrutiny that followed. It's a moment that will continue to be analyzed, debated, and remembered, not as entertainment, but as a vivid example of the human stakes behind celebrity life and the unseen consequences of relentless ambition. That night, everything seemed normal, or as normal as a high-profile Cardi B performance can be. Cardi B stepped onto the stage, her signature confidence radiating across the arena. Every movement, every lyric, every beat was executed with the precision and energy that had become her trademark. Fans were screaming, cameras were rolling, and the energy was nothing short of electric. Cardi B has built her career on commanding attention, owning every second she is in the spotlight. And that night, like so many before, it seemed like she would deliver flawlessly. But behind the glamour and the lights, something subtle was already happening. It wasn't obvious at first. A small hesitation here, a micro shift in posture there, details easily overlooked by the audience, but not by those closest to her. Cardi has always been a powerhouse performer, relentless and unstoppable. But even the strongest performers are human, and that human element was quietly starting to show. Then it happened. Cardi collapsed. Not a minor stumble, not a brief fainting spell. She fell completely, suddenly, and unexpectedly. The music seemed to vanish, the energy of the room dropped, and panic set in instantly. Crew members rushed from every corner. People were shouting for medical attention, and for a few seconds, nobody knew exactly how to respond. Nothing in rehearsals or planning could have prepared them for this. The chaos was immediate. In the middle of this chaos stood Offset. Witnesses say he didn't hesitate, didn't step back, didn't maintain the composed, controlled persona he usually projects in public. He ran toward her, calling her name, dropping to his knees beside her, shaking with fear, desperate for her to respond. "Cardi, Cardi, look at me," he repeated over and over, the panic in his voice raw and unmistakable. What made Offset's reaction so striking is that insiders say he had been aware of the warning signs long before the collapse. He had reportedly noticed the fatigue in her step, the subtle shifts in expression, and the tiny hints of exhaustion that even the most devoted fans might not notice. According to sources close to the couple, he had urged her to rest, to slow down, and to consider taking a break. Warnings that, at the time, may have seemed unnecessary to an audience that only saw the stage performance. But Cardi, as always, pushed forward. Stopping was not in her nature. Millions of fans were watching, cameras were rolling, and expectations were high. Her drive, her work ethic, her ambition, all of it demanded she keep going. And yet, that relentless energy was part of the problem. The tension between her refusal to slow down and Offset's growing concern created a pressure cooker situation backstage. Within seconds of her collapse, the internet went into overdrive. Social media erupted with speculation. If it wasn't just exhaustion, then what was it? Fans and observers started theorizing wildly. Was it stress? Was it something medical? Was there an external factor nobody knew about? Every conceivable theory circulated, each more elaborate than the last. and in the absence of confirmed information, rumors thrived. Threads began breaking down every second of every clip of the performance, zooming in on Cardi's posture, her facial expressions, her movements. People analyzed past performances, looking for patterns, trying to find clues that could explain what had happened. The conversation shifted from empathy to accountability. Supporters argued that Cardi was human, overworked, and under immense pressure. Critics, however, asked uncomfortable questions. Why was she performing if she wasn't ready? Who is responsible for ensuring performers' safety? Could this collapse have been prevented? Social media debates became heated. The story no longer revolved solely around Cardi B. It became a larger reflection on the entertainment industry, fame, and the invisible pressures that high-profile artists endure. Amid the chaos, a small but crucial detail emerged from witnesses who were present at the venue. They claimed that Cardi did not simply receive routine medical attention and continue on. Instead, she was immediately and urgently taken out of the venue, her condition more serious than initially reported. Offset reportedly remained by her side the entire time, never leaving her. One witness even shared that he said something quietly during the evacuation, words that have since reverberated across social media. They should have listened. Those 3 words carried enormous weight, implying that warnings had been ignored and that the incident might have been preventable. As this information circulated, the public began connecting dots. Earlier signs of fatigue, the subtle clips of her backstage movements, the internal discussions about whether she should perform, Offset's visible panic, and now this final statement suggesting ignored warnings. The narrative became not just about what happened, but about what could have been avoided, and whether the pressures of performance culture had contributed to a potentially dangerous situation. Just when it seemed the story had reached its peak, another twist surfaced. Later that same day, a cryptic social media post appeared from an account historically linked to people close to high-profile artists. The post read, "This ain't just about last night. There's more coming, and when it drops, everything changes." No names, no specifics, just a carefully crafted message that immediately intensified speculation. Social media exploded. Fans and insiders alike were left waiting, analyzing the timing, the wording, and the implications. It was clear that what had happened backstage was only one part of a larger, still unfolding story. Through all of this, neither Cardi B nor Offset had issued any public statement. There was silence. No clarification, no explanation, no denial. And that silence paradoxically amplified the drama. In the absence of information, speculation thrived. Rumors flourished. Fans debated theories late into the night, trying to piece together a story that no one had officially confirmed. The lack of clarity raised an even more pressing question. What are they not telling us? The public and media focus shifted again. Every new clip, every insider hint, and every fan-recorded video added fuel to the fire. Analysts combed through performances, interviews, and social media posts, examining micro-expressions, posture, and energy. Every minor detail became a clue in a larger puzzle. Had this incident been avoidable? Could the collapse have been predicted? And if so, why had no one acted sooner? Offset's emotional response remained at the center of the conversation. His panic, his fear, and his desperation suggested that the signs had been there all along, and that he may have understood the gravity of the situation before anyone else. Witnesses' accounts, combined with leaked posts and fan observations, painted a picture of a night where pressure, fatigue, and human limits collided with high expectations and a relentless performance schedule. The situation escalated beyond fans and social media. Industry insiders, tour managers, and artists began weighing in, discussing systemic issues around performer welfare, overwork, and the dangers of ignoring signs of distress. Media outlets started framing the story not merely as a collapse, but as a cautionary tale about the entertainment industry, celebrity culture, and the human cost of relentless ambition. As the conversation raged online, the narrative took on a life of its own. Clips of Cardi, Offset's reaction, rumors of backstage disagreements, subtle warnings, and cryptic posts merged into a larger story. A story that highlighted the pressures artists face, the difficult decisions teams must make, and the very real consequences when warnings go unheeded. The public debate wasn't just about a single incident. It was about responsibility, care, and the hidden struggles behind the glitz and glamour of the stage. By the next morning, the situation had reached an unprecedented level of attention. Every video, every comment, every insider post was scrutinized. The narrative had evolved from shock to speculation to systemic critique. Fans and insiders debated endlessly. Was this a health scare, or a warning about the intense pressures performers endure? Was it preventable, or was it the inevitable result of pushing the human body and mind beyond their limits? And throughout all of it, the silence from Cardi B and Offset loomed large. Without official statements, rumors, speculation, and theories filled the void. The internet was divided. Some defended Cardi, emphasizing the pressure she faces and the humanity behind the collapse. Others questioned the decisions made by her team, wondering whether proper precautions had been taken. Offset's reaction became emblematic of the entire situation. Fear, concern, and raw emotion that suggested a deeper story, one that had yet to fully unfold. At this point, the conversation had transformed from a simple incident into a saga with multiple layers. Each new revelation, each subtle clue, each cryptic post added complexity. What had initially seemed like a shocking moment of vulnerability now represented a broader reflection on the entertainment industry, celebrity expectations, and the hidden costs of relentless ambition. The story was far from over, and the next development, another clip, another insider statement, another cryptic post, had the potential to completely reshape public perception. The most pressing question remained. Was this just a health scare or the beginning of something bigger? The warnings, the ignored signs, the backstage tension, and Offset's emotional reaction all pointed to a complex, multi-layered story that goes far beyond what the public initially saw. And until Cardi or Offset addresses it directly, speculation will continue. The public, the industry, and the fans are left with questions, uncertainty, and the unsettling reminder that even the most confident, powerful performers are human, and that even in the most controlled environments, unforeseen crises can emerge. What do you think really happened with Cardi B? Was this simply a case of being overworked, pushed beyond her limits, and reaching the breaking point? Or is there something deeper behind the scenes, something we haven't been told yet, an element that could completely change the way we understand that night? And then there's Offset. His reaction went viral for a reason. Do you believe it was just raw, in-the-moment emotion, or does it feel like he knew something was seriously wrong before anyone else did? The fear, the panic, the urgency, was it instinct or awareness of something the public hasn't seen? This is exactly the kind of story where every perspective matters. Every theory, every insight adds another piece to the puzzle. And if you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just another viral moment. It's a situation still unfolding, full of unknowns and questions that demand answers. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you're following this story. Subscribe and turn on footage appears, updates emerge, or someone breaks their silence. Will bring it to you immediately. This story is far from over, and the next revelation could change everything.